Relax and unwind as we explore the incredible automata crafted by Hephaestus, the god of invention. From bronze bulls to lifelike statues, you'll be immersed in the wonder of these divine creations. Let this soothing voice guide you into a peaceful sleep, offering the perfect escape into the most amazing stories Greek mythology has to offer. If you haven't already, make sure to explore my channel to find the most unique and authentic tales of Greek mythology and hit that subscribe button while you are at it. The automaton family was a remarkable creation of the gods, born from the skilled hands of the divine smith Hephaestus and the brilliant craftsman Daedalus. These automaton statues, crafted in the shapes of animals, men, and even monstrous beings, were brought to life with the magic of the gods. The best among them were not mere statues. They could think and feel, almost as though they were living creatures. Among these creations, the Hippoikaberikoi stood out, 4 horse-shaped automata crafted by Hephaestus to pull the adamantine chariot of the Kaberoi, sons of Hephaestus. These horses, made of bronze, were described with intricate detail in the Dionysiaca, where they were said to have brass hooves that beat the dust with a thunderous sound, and their throats produced a dry, whinnying noise. They were fiery, with their mouths exhaling flames, as fierce and powerful as the brazen-footed bulls Hephaestus had made for Aeetes, the king of the Colchians. These steeds, under the control of Eurymedon, one of the Kaberoi, galloped with burning collars and blazing poles, a sight that was nothing short of awe-inspiring. Their creator, Hephaestus, had crafted them with unmatched skill, breathing life into them through his divine artistry. The horses were not just mechanical beasts, but seemed to possess a defiant fire within, as though they were creatures of both metal and spirit, bound by the will of the gods, yet free in their movements and strength. Hephaestus' skill in forging such beings demonstrated not just his ability to craft beautiful objects, but his deep connection with the primal forces of life and nature, as he imbued these creations with the essence of both art and power. Another of Hephaestus' most famous creations was the Aitos Kaukasios, the gigantic eagle sent by Zeus to torment the titan Prometheus. Bound to a peak in the Caucasus Mountains as punishment for stealing fire from the gods, Prometheus was cursed with eternal suffering. Every day the eagle would feast upon his liver, and every night it would regenerate, ensuring that Prometheus's torture would never cease. The eagle was often depicted as a bronze automaton crafted by Hephaestus himself, or alternatively, as a monstrous creature born of the Dracaena Echidna, a terrifying and ancient being of the wilds. Regardless of its origin, the eagle became a symbol of Zeus's wrath and the unending punishment of Prometheus. When Heracles, the great hero, set out to free Prometheus, he struck the eagle down with a volley of arrows, ending its cruel torment. This act of bravery and compassion not only saved Prometheus, but also allowed the Titan to gain a measure of freedom. The eagle's death, along with the liberation of Prometheus, was so significant that the 3 figures, Heracles, Prometheus, and the eagle, were placed among the stars as constellations. The eagle became the constellation Aquila, the Nila, and Sagitta, marking the eternal link between the eagle's torment and the hero's victory. These celestial bodies stood as a reminder of the power of the gods, the resilience of mortals, and the unyielding will of Heracles to free Prometheus from his chains. The eagle's form, whether born of metal or monstrous flesh, was not just a creature of destruction, but a pivotal figure in the tale of sacrifice and redemption that echoed through the heavens. The origins of the eagle are varied, with different sources offering different explanations. Some say it was the offspring of the fearsome Typhoeus and the Dracaena Echidna, while others claim it was a creature born from Tartaros and Gaia, the very forces of chaos and earth. But in all accounts, the eagle's role in the punishment of Prometheus remained constant. It was a divine instrument of torment, an agent of Zeus's anger, and a constant reminder of the Titan's transgression. Over time, as the tale of Prometheus's suffering spread through the lands, the eagle became an emblem of the eternal cycle of punishment and redemption, a creature that was both feared and revered for the power it represented. Yet in the end, it was Heracles, the greatest of the Greek heroes, who ended its reign of terror and restored balance to the world by freeing Prometheus and slaying the eagle. These two families of automatons, Hephaestus's fiery horses and the mighty eagle, demonstrated the incredible skill of the divine smith and his ability to create life from metal. The Hepoi Kaberikoi were not just mechanical horses. They were symbols of Hephaestus's creative genius and his deep connection to the forces of fire and metal. Their fiery breath and unyielding strength were a testament to Hephaestus's power to manipulate the natural world and bend it to his will. Similarly, the Aetos Kaukasios was not merely a bird of prey, but a creature forged with purpose, bound by divine command to carry out the will of the gods. The two creations, though different in form and function, both embodied the same core principles: life, power, and the unyielding force of divine craftsmanship. Through these creations, Hephaestus demonstrated not just his artistic skill, but his role as a bridge between the divine and the mortal worlds, forging beings that were both instruments of the gods and symbols of the power they wielded. It was not without the will of Zeus, the mighty ruler of Olympus, that the glory of Heracles, born in Thebes, would rise above all others, surpassing even the greatest of heroes who walked the earth. As Prometheus lay bound upon the craggy peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, chained by the will of Zeus himself, he could feel the torment closing in on him. Each day, he would endure the savage assault of the eagle sent by Zeus, the bird that would tear at his immortal liver with cruel talons, feeding upon his flesh in an endless cycle of pain. The air around him would hum with the sound of the eagle's wings, a shrill, rustling stir that filled Prometheus with dread. He could hear it before he saw it. The eagle approaching, its wings cutting through the air, the rustling sound a harbinger of the agony to come. Prometheus would tremble as the creature drew near, knowing that soon the searing pain would come again, as the eagle, ravenous and relentless, would descend upon him, tearing into his body, gnawing hungrily at his liver, leaving him with nothing but the sensation of endless suffering. Every third day, this brutal feast would occur, as the eagle would return to devour Prometheus's regenerating liver, ensuring that his torment would never cease. The pain would never end, as Prometheus's body, bound in unyielding chains, had no power to escape. He could only endure helpless and alone while his liver grew back each night, only to be devoured once again by the merciless bird. Each cycle of torment was more agonizing than the last, a punishment that Zeus had devised to break Prometheus, to make him pay for his defiance in stealing fire from the gods and giving it to mortals. The torment was endless, a cruel reminder of Zeus's absolute power, and Prometheus, in his suffering, longed for death. Yet even in his darkest moments, death would not come, for Zeus's will had condemned him to live on in this agonizing state, his body a vessel of unending pain. The centuries dragged on, and the heat of the sun would melt the drops of agony from his body as they fell from the crags of the Caucasus, burning the earth below. His suffering seemed endless, his spirit crushed beneath the weight of his punishment. Yet even in this bleakest of moments, there was hope. Heracles, the great hero, was destined to free Prometheus from his eternal suffering. In the lost play Prometheus Unbound, Heracles was depicted as the one who would finally end Prometheus's agony. Armed with his bow, Heracles would take aim at the tormenting eagle, praying to Apollo, the god of the hunt, to guide his arrow true with the strength of his arm and the might of the gods behind him. Heracles would strike the eagle down, ending its reign of terror and finally freeing Prometheus from his chains. This act would not only bring Prometheus relief, but also fulfill the prophecy that Heracles, in his heroic deeds, would rise to greatness beyond all others. His victory over the eagle and his act of compassion in freeing Prometheus would cement his place among the greatest of Greek heroes, his name remembered for all time as the one who overcame the impossible to bring justice to the tortured Titan. Prometheus, once bound and suffering, would be freed, and the chains that had held him for so long would be shattered, allowing him to stand tall once again. Prometheus's story is one of immense suffering, but also of hope and redemption. The endless pain he endured, the agony of his immortal body being torn apart day after day, was not without purpose. It was through his suffering that the glory of Heracles would shine even brighter, as the hero's strength and valor would be tested in his struggle to release the Titan from his bonds. This act of bravery would mark a turning point in the myth of Prometheus, for it would be through Heracles' intervention that Prometheus would be granted his release, and his suffering would finally come to an end. And while the tale of Prometheus's torture is filled with anguish, it is also a story of the gods' intricate plans and the heroes who rise to fulfill them, no matter the cost. In the end, it was not the will of Zeus alone that determined Prometheus's fate, but the strength and compassion of Heracles, who, armed with the power of the gods, was able to break the chains of torment and free the Titan from his eternal suffering. The myth of Prometheus serves as a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of heroes, and the unyielding will of the gods, whose actions ripple through time, shaping the lives of those who come after. Zeus, in his unyielding will, ordered the mighty Hephaestus to rivet the body of Prometheus to the towering peaks of Mount Caucasus, a mountain in the land of the Scythians. There Prometheus was bound and chained for many years, his body fastened to the jagged rocks by unbreakable bronze fetters, his limbs immobilized in agony. Each day the punishment would begin anew, as an eagle, a creature sent by Zeus, would swoop down from the heavens, its wings beating with the power of a storm, and tear into the liver of the Titan. The eagle, ravenous and relentless, would feast upon Prometheus's immortal liver, ripping at it with its sharp talons and beak, its hunger insatiable. But as cruel as the eagle's torment was, there was no escape for Prometheus. For every night his liver would regenerate, growing back in full, only to be devoured once again when the eagle returned at dawn. This cycle of pain, suffering, and torment would repeat day after day, and Prometheus, helpless and alone, could do nothing but endure the agony. His body, bound by the will of Zeus, was helpless to drive the eagle away, and the torment he suffered seemed endless, a punishment that would stretch across the centuries. It was a cruel fate, to be tortured eternally, his very essence consumed by the hunger of the eagle. The air around him would be filled with the rustling of wings, the sound of the eagle's approach, and Prometheus would tremble in fear, knowing the pain would soon return. But in time, a hero arose, a figure whose deeds would shine brighter than those of any mortal or god, Heracles, a mighty hero known for his strength and bravery, could not stand by while the Titan suffered. When he came upon the land of the Scythians, he saw the craggy peaks of the Caucasus Mountains in the distance, and as he neared the mountains, he could hear the shrill cry of the eagle as it descended upon Prometheus once again. Heracles, knowing the Titan's plight, wasted no time. With a single swift shot, he drew his bow and loosed an arrow that struck the eagle down in mid-flight. The great bird, whose wings had caused terror and pain for so long, fell from the sky, its reign of torment brought to an end by Heracles' strength and precision. The Titan was freed, and the chains that had bound him for so long were shattered, allowing Prometheus to stand tall once more. This act of courage, of compassion, was one of the many great feats that Heracles would achieve in his life, and it solidified his place in the annals of Greek mythology. Prometheus, who had suffered for so long, could finally be at peace, and the torment he had endured for centuries came to an end. The eagle, once a symbol of Zeus's wrath, now lay defeated at the hands of Heracles, and the sky above the Caucasus was forever changed. Yet the story did not end with the death of the eagle, for the blood of Prometheus, spilled by the cruel beak of the bird, would not vanish. From the blood of the Titan, a miraculous plant would sprout, its roots and leaves imbued with the power of Prometheus's suffering. The magical herb, which grew from the drops of ichor spilled upon the earth by the eagle, would come to symbolize both the pain and the redemption of Prometheus. It was as if nature itself, in response to the Titan's torment, had created a gift from the ashes of suffering. This plant, born from the very blood of Prometheus, would become a symbol of hope, a symbol of the healing that comes after the deepest pain. And so, from Prometheus's suffering, life would spring anew, a testament to the resilience of life itself, even in the face of the greatest adversity. As time passed, the tale of Prometheus and the eagle would be passed down through the generations. Artists and poets would immortalize the moment when Heracles, the great hero, slew the tormenting bird, and Prometheus was finally freed from his chains. In temples dedicated to the gods, scenes of Prometheus chained to the mountain and Heracles slaying the eagle would be carved into stone, painted onto walls, and displayed for all to see. In one such depiction, seen at Olympia, Prometheus is shown still bound by his chains, but now Heracles is depicted as having risen up to him, a symbol of hope and salvation for the suffering Titan. The image of Heracles, his arrow drawn and aimed at the eagle, stood as a reminder to all who looked upon it, that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable torment, there was always the possibility of redemption, of salvation. The eagle, once a symbol of Zeus's anger and power, was now a defeated creature, its wings clipped by the hero's arrow, its hunger silenced forever. And so, the myth of Prometheus and the eagle endured, not just as a story of suffering and torment, but as a story of redemption, of hope, and of the unwavering power of the hero to bring an end to even the greatest of pains. Through the courage of Heracles, Prometheus was freed, and the suffering that had lasted for so long came to an end. The eagle, once a tool of Zeus's punishment, was no more, and in its place stood the eternal image of Heracles, the hero who defied the gods to free a Titan. This myth, like so many others, would live on through the ages, a reminder of the strength of heroes, the resilience of life, and the power of redemption. The great mountain of Caucasus, towering high in the land of the Scythians, became the prison of Prometheus, where he was bound in chains for 30,000 years by the will of Zeus. There, on the craggy cliffs of the mountain, the Titans suffered endless torment, as each day an eagle fierce and ravenous, would swoop down from the sky and tear into his liver. The eagle, sent by Zeus to punish the Titan for his defiance in giving fire to mankind, would feast upon the immortal liver of Prometheus, its sharp talons and beak tearing into the flesh, its hunger insatiable. But this torment was far from simple. Each night, as the eagle flew away, Prometheus's liver would regenerate, growing back anew, only to be devoured once again by the eagle the following day. The cycle of pain never ceased. Prometheus, bound and helpless, endured this agony for what seemed like an eternity, his cries of anguish echoing through the air as the eagle returned again and again, its monstrous form a symbol of Zeus's wrath and power. The very sky above Caucasus seemed to tremble with the eagle's wings as it circled above the Titan, waiting for the right moment to strike. Each time the eagle descended upon him, Prometheus could do nothing but suffer, his body racked with the pain of the unending assault. The eagle was relentless, and Prometheus's suffering seemed endless. His body, once a mighty force of nature, now lay in ruins upon the rocky peaks, its form a mere vessel for the eagle's cruel feast. But in the midst of Prometheus's torment, a hero arose. Heracles, known for his strength and bravery, was sent on a great task that would bring him to the very mountain where Prometheus was bound. When he reached the shores of the Black Sea and caught sight of the high crags of Caucasus in the distance, he knew he had come to the right place. Prometheus, though bound and broken, had been a source of knowledge and guidance for many, and Heracles, in his quest, had heard of the Titan's suffering. It was said that the eagle was sent by Zeus himself to torment Prometheus, and that this cruel punishment would continue until someone could break the chains that held the Titan in place. Heracles, ever the champion of the gods and mortals alike, could not stand by and let such an injustice continue. He was determined to free Prometheus from his chains and end the torment that had lasted for so long. When Heracles approached the mountain, he saw the eagle circling above, its wings beating powerfully through the air. He could hear the sound of Prometheus's cries, the pain in his voice as the eagle tore at his liver once again. With his bow in hand and his mighty strength at the ready, Heracles took aim at the eagle. With a single shot, he released the arrow, striking the great bird down in mid-flight. The eagle, its wings still flapping, fell to the ground with a thundering crash, its reign of terror brought to an end by the hero's arrow. Prometheus, freed from his torment, was no longer bound by the chains that had held him for so long. Heracles, in his great mercy and strength, had shattered the bonds that had kept the Titan prisoner for 30,000 years. The chains, once unbreakable, lay in pieces upon the rocky ground, and Prometheus stood tall once more, his body free from the pain that had consumed it for so long. The eagle, once a symbol of Zeus's fury, now lay slain, its form a lifeless heap beside the mountain where Prometheus had suffered. With the eagle slain and the chains broken, Prometheus was free at last. But his torment had not been in vain. The myth of Prometheus, of his suffering and his eventual release, became a symbol of hope and resilience, of the power of the hero to stand against the gods and bring justice to those who had been wronged. Prometheus, though once tormented by Zeus's wrath, was now free, and his legacy would live on in the hearts of men. No longer would the eagle tear at his liver, for the cycle of suffering had been broken, and Prometheus was free to walk the earth once more. Heracles, in his great act of bravery, had proven himself not just a hero of strength, but a hero of compassion, one who would stand up for those who could not stand for themselves. His victory over the eagle became a moment of legend, and the story of Prometheus's release would be told for generations to come. In the wake of Prometheus's freedom, the world began to change. The once feared eagle, a creature that had come to symbolize Zeus's anger and power, was now no more. It had been slain by the very hero who had freed the Titan, and its death marked the end of an era of torment. The people, who had long feared the eagle's shadow, now offered sacrifices in honor of Prometheus, and in place of the liver that had once been devoured by the bird, they offered the livers of animals on the altars to satisfy the gods. The sacrifice became a symbol of gratitude, of the restoration of balance in the world, and the freedom of Prometheus was celebrated with great reverence. Heracles, having completed his task, returned to the world as a hero, his name forever etched into the annals of Greek mythology. He had freed Prometheus from his chains, ended the torment that had lasted for 30,000 years, and restored peace to the land. And so, the tale of Prometheus and Heracles became one of the greatest stories in Greek mythology, a story of suffering, heroism, and redemption. Through the courage and strength of Heracles, the chains were broken, the eagle was slain, and Prometheus was freed from his eternal torment. The sky above Caucasus, once darkened by the shadow of the eagle, was now clear, and the earth below was forever changed by the hero's actions. In the remote crags of the Caucasus, Prometheus was bound, imprisoned by chains forged by the hands of Hephaestus, the divine smith. For years he endured torment, his body shackled to the rocky heights of the mountain. Every day, the eagle, sent by Zeus to punish him for his defiance, would descend upon him, tearing into his liver with sharp talons, feasting on his immortal flesh. The pain was unceasing, and each day the eagle would return, its hunger insatiable. For as much as it devoured, Prometheus's liver would regenerate every night, only to be torn apart again at dawn. This endless cycle of suffering continued, and the great Titan was helpless, bound to the mountain, his cries of agony echoing through the winds of the Caucasus. Even the winds seemed to mourn his fate, and the mountain itself was forever changed by the torment that took place upon its craggy peaks. The myth of Prometheus's punishment was known far and wide, and many poets and storytellers spoke of the great Titan's suffering. One such poet sang of the Caucasian eagles and the theft of Prometheus, lamenting the cruel punishment that had been inflicted upon him. The words of the poets carried the story across the land, and it was said that even the gods were moved by Prometheus's plight. His suffering seemed endless, a punishment so cruel that it brought tears even to the gods. In one telling of the tale, it was said that the eagle, after feeding upon Prometheus's liver, would take flight, leaving the Titan alone in his agony, only to return the next day to feast again. The eagle became a symbol of Zeus's wrath, an unrelenting force that ravaged Prometheus without mercy. But in the face of such torment, there was also a glimmer of hope. Heracles, the great hero, was destined to end Prometheus's suffering. The mighty hero would come to the Caucasus, slay the eagle, and free the Titan from his chains. Heracles' arrival was nothing short of heroic. When he came upon the mountain, he saw the craggy peaks of Caucasus rising high into the sky, and he could hear the eagle's screech as it soared overhead, its wings beating the air with the power of a storm. Heracles knew what he had to do. With his bow in hand, he drew back the string and let loose an arrow, striking the eagle down in mid-flight. The great bird fell to the ground, defeated by the hero's strength and skill. The cycle of torment was broken, and Prometheus was freed from the chains that had held him for so long. The eagle, once a symbol of Zeus's anger, was now a lifeless heap upon the ground, and Prometheus was at last liberated from his eternal punishment. But the story did not end with the slaying of the eagle. From the blood that had been spilled, a magical herb grew, its potency unlike any other. This herb, born from the blood of Prometheus, was said to have incredible healing powers. It was nurtured by the blood that had been spilled upon the snow and ice of the Caucasus, and it became a symbol of the Titan's suffering and eventual redemption. The herb was so powerful that it was used by the witch Medea in her magic, and it became a symbol of the connection between Prometheus's pain and the world around him. The blood that had been shed on the mountain had given life to something new, a gift from the suffering of the Titan, and this herb would go on to play a crucial role in the tales of other heroes and gods. As Prometheus stood free from his chains, the world seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. His torment had ended, and the eagle that had once tormented him was no more. The land around the mountain, once silent and still, seemed to stir with life as the Titan was released from his agony. The blood that had been spilled upon the earth had created something beautiful, and the once desolate peaks of Caucasus were no longer a place of suffering, but a place of rebirth. The world had changed, and Prometheus, though scarred by his torment, was now a symbol of endurance, of hope, and of the power of redemption. Prometheus's story did not fade with the passing of time. It was retold by poets and artists who depicted the Titan's suffering and his eventual freedom in their works. In one depiction, the Titan was shown still bound to the mountain, his body stretched across the rocky crags, while Heracles approached, a hero on a quest to free him from his torment. This image, painted on the walls of temples and woven into the fabric of myth, became a symbol of the strength and courage needed to overcome even the greatest of challenges. The hero's victory over the eagle was seen as a triumph, not just for Prometheus, but for all those who would suffer under the weight of the god's wrath. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope for redemption, and that the greatest heroes were those who fought for the freedom of others. The Celadons, golden singing automata, forged by Hephaestus, were said to be part of the tapestry of myths surrounding Prometheus and his torment. These magical creatures, who took the form of bird women, were believed to have the power to soothe the hearts of men with their sweet, enchanting songs. Their voices, like those of the sirens, were said to have the power to bring peace and calm to those who heard them. The Celadons were crafted by Hephaestus for the second temple of Apollo at Delphi, and their golden forms hung as a reminder of the divine artistry that could both create and heal. They were not just creations of gold, but symbols of the beauty that could come from the pain and suffering of the world. Like the herb that grew from Prometheus's blood, the Celadons were born from the divine hands of the gods, and they represented the balance between suffering and healing, destruction and creation. And so, the story of Prometheus and the eagle, of Heracles' bravery and the Titan's redemption, became woven into the fabric of Greek mythology, a tale of suffering, courage, and ultimate release. The blood of Prometheus, spilled upon the icy peaks of the Caucasus, had given life to something new and powerful, and the echoes of his cries would forever resonate in the hearts of those who heard the story of his torment and his freedom. The legend of Prometheus would endure, a testament to the enduring power of hope, the strength of heroes, and the capacity for redemption, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. The Celadons, golden singing automata crafted by Hephaestus, were said to be magical beings that graced the temples of the gods with their enchanting voices. These beings, made of gold, took the forms of beautiful women, birds, or a combination of both. They were thought to possess a unique ability, just like the sirens of old, to mesmerize and charm those who heard their songs. Their beauty was unmatched, and their voices were said to carry an almost divine power that could soothe or enthrall anyone within earshot. The Chelidons were originally created for the second temple of Apollo at Delphi, a place of great significance in Greek mythology. The golden maidens were positioned as attendants within the temple, and it was said that they would sing sweet melodies, filling the air with their heavenly voices, making the temple a place of both wonder and awe. The Chelidons had a special connection to Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths and artisans. He crafted them from the finest gold, bestowing upon them not only beauty, but also a divine purpose. These golden maidens were considered to be living statues, embodiments of Hephaestus's unparalleled skill in creating automata that could mimic life. Their presence at the temple of Apollo further emphasized the divine craftsmanship of Hephaestus, showcasing the extent of his artistic mastery. The temple at Delphi, where the Chelidons were displayed, was built of bronze, a material both durable and magnificent, fitting for a god like Apollo. The temple was not only a place of worship, but also a symbol of the god's connection to the earth. Inside the temple, the Chelidons would sing in harmony, their voices rising like a melody from the heavens, captivating all who came to hear. Their songs were said to possess magical properties, much like the songs of the sirens, able to allure and enchant those who listened. Some even claimed that the Chelidons' singing had the power to bring forth a sense of peace and tranquility, while others believed their songs could foretell the future. The Chelidons were not just beautiful creatures. They were a symbol of the power of music and art, of the divine talent that Hephaestus poured into his creations. Despite the ambiguity surrounding their origin and the temple's ultimate fate, the Chelidons remained one of the most extraordinary examples of Hephaestus's ingenuity, embodying both the beauty and the magic of his craft. The myth surrounding the Chelidons was not the only instance in which Hephaestus's skill was celebrated. In another famous creation, Hephaestus crafted the Chrysae, or golden maidens, who were woman-shaped golden automata, designed to serve as attendants in Hephaestus's own palace. These golden maidens were created in his divine smithy and were given intelligence and speech, imbuing them with the lifelike qualities that made them extraordinary. They were said to have been able to perform tasks and offer support to their master, demonstrating not only Hephaestus's artistic skill, but also his understanding of what it meant to create life through art. These golden figures had both beauty and function, moving gracefully and purposefully within Hephaestus's palace, acting as both servants and companions. They were not mere statues. They were living, breathing creations, imbued with a spark of life and purpose. The maidens' golden forms shimmered with the light, and their intelligence and speech were gifts from the gods, learned through the divine knowledge Hephaestus had instilled in them. Their presence in the smithy was a testament to Hephaestus's ability to create beings that were both beautiful and practical, merging the artistic and functional aspects of creation in a way that no other god could replicate. They were a reflection of Hephaestus's genius, showcasing his ability to blend artistry with the divine will of the gods. The story of the Golden Maidens was a part of the larger narrative of Hephaestus's remarkable craftsmanship. Hephaestus was known for his exceptional ability to forge life from metal, creating beings that were as alive as any mortal or god. His skill was unparalleled, and his creations, like the Calydons and the Koraikriseai, were evidence of his profound connection to both the earth and the divine. These creations were not just works of art, they were symbols of the divine power that Hephaestus wielded, allowing him to bring the beauty of the gods to the mortal world. They served as guardians, attendants, and even muses for the gods, each creation embodying a unique aspect of divine craftsmanship. Their lifelike movements and abilities were a testament to the divine knowledge and skills that Hephaestus had been given, making him one of the most revered gods in the Greek pantheon. The Calydons, with their golden forms and enchanting voices, were not just beautiful creations. They were a part of the divine order, a bridge between the gods and the mortals who worshipped them. In addition to the golden maidens, Hephaestus also crafted Talos, a giant bronze automaton that was said to be one of his greatest creations. Talos was a living statue, a sentinel made of bronze, tasked with guarding the shores of Crete and protecting the island from invaders. His purpose was simple but vital. He was to ensure that the island remained safe and free from harm. Talos was a formidable creation, made entirely of bronze, and his immense size made him an intimidating figure. His movements were powered by the divine craftsmanship of Hephaestus, who had designed him to be both strong and agile, a perfect guardian for the island. Like the Calydons and the Koraikriseai, Talos was a testament to Hephaestus' skill in creating life from metal. But Talos was different in that he served a protective function, not just a decorative one. His strength and power were unmatched, making him a vital part of the mythological world. Talos' role in protecting Crete and his subsequent involvement in the story of the Argonauts further solidified Hephaestus' place as the god of divine craftsmanship, capable of creating beings that could serve both practical and artistic purposes. These golden creations, whether they were the enchanting Calydons, the graceful Koraikriseai, or the powerful Talos, served as symbols of Hephaestus' unmatched skill as a creator. They were living works of art, designed to serve the gods and mortals alike, and their presence in the myths of the gods helped to elevate Hephaestus to a status of unparalleled reverence among the ancient Greeks. Each creation told its own story, showcasing Hephaestus' incredible artistry and his ability to breathe life into lifeless materials. From the shimmering golden maidens to the mighty bronze automaton, Hephaestus' creations remain among the most awe-inspiring in Greek mythology, a lasting testament to the power of divine craftsmanship. Talos, the giant bronze man, was forged by Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, and given to Europa as a gift after Zeus delivered her safely to the island of Crete. This mighty creature was tasked with guarding the island, a duty he took on with great zeal. Talos, though a creation of bronze, was as alive as any mortal, moving with strength and purpose. He would patrol the island, walking around its perimeter 3 times a day, ensuring that no unwanted visitors approached the land. His towering form and incredible strength made him a formidable guardian, and he was more than capable of keeping any intruders at bay. When pirates or anyone dared to approach the island, Talos would hurl great stones at them, using his immense power to drive them away. His fierce dedication to his duty made him an iconic figure of protection for the people of Crete. The giant's body was not made of flesh and blood, but of the finest bronze, and it was said that Talos could make himself red hot by heating his body in flames, and then he would embrace any strangers who dared to land on the shores, burning them in the process. This fiery embrace was one of his most terrifying traits, ensuring that the island remained safe from those who might bring harm. But Talos's story did not end with his vigilant guarding of Crete. One day, the Argonauts, a group of heroes on a quest for the Golden Fleece, arrived at the island, seeking to land and resupply. When Talos saw the ship approaching, he immediately sprang into action, hurling stones at the vessel to prevent it from docking. He was determined to stop anyone from setting foot on the island, believing it was his sacred duty to keep it safe. However, despite Talos's formidable efforts, he was eventually outwitted. According to some versions of the story, it was the witch Medea, who accompanied the Argonauts, who used her magic to put Talos into a state of madness. She tricked him into believing that she was helping him achieve immortality. In this state, Medea removed the bronze stud that sealed Talos's only vein, the one that ran from his head to his ankle, causing his lifeblood to spill out. Without the stud to hold the vein closed, Talos bled to death, his great strength and fire fading as he collapsed. Other versions tell of Poeas, a hero who shot Talos in the ankle with a poisoned arrow, striking at his vulnerable spot and causing the mighty bronze giant to fall. Talos's death marked the end of his role as the guardian of Crete, and the island was no longer under his protection. His passing was a pivotal moment in the story of the Argonauts, as they were able to land on the island and continue their journey. Though Talos was ultimately destroyed, his legacy lived on. He was a symbol of the Bronze Age, representing both the power of Hephaestus's craftsmanship and the strength of the ancient bronze race of men. Talos was considered the last of these bronze men, a reminder of an era long past, and his death marked the end of an age of metal beings. Talos's legacy also lived on in the form of his family and his connection to the sun. In the genealogy of the ancient poet Canaithan, Talos was said to be a son of the island of Crete itself, the personification of the land, and he was also the father of Hephaestus, the god of fire and metalwork. This connection to Hephaestus, the divine smith who had crafted Talos, added a layer of depth to the giant's story, as it tied his existence to the power of the gods and the creation of life through craftsmanship. The word Talos itself was thought to mean sun in the dialect of Crete, further linking him to the powerful forces of nature. In some versions of the myth, it was said that Talos was also the brother of Pasiphae, the moon goddess of Crete, wife to King Minos. This connection between the sun and moon, represented by Talos and Pasiphae, illustrated the balance between opposing forces and the idea that the world of the gods was deeply interconnected, with each figure playing a part in the cosmic order. Talos, in his role as the sun god, was also a reminder of the vital importance of the sun in ancient Greek mythology. His connection to the sun was not just symbolic, but tied to the very nature of life on Earth. The heat and light of the sun were essential for growth and prosperity, just as Talos's fiery embrace was essential for the protection of Crete. In classical art, Talos was often depicted as a handsome young man carved from bronze, a fitting representation of Hephaestus's mastery over the art of metalworking. His physical form was not just an impressive feat of craftsmanship, but also a symbol of the potential of the Bronze Age. The depiction of Talos as a young man was also a reminder of the fleeting nature of life, even for those who were created to be as strong as gods. Though Talos was made of metal, he was still vulnerable to the forces of the world, and his eventual demise at the hands of the Argonauts marked a shift in the mythological landscape. His death symbolized the end of the Age of Bronze and the beginning of a new era, one where the gods and mortals would continue to shape their destinies through both creation and destruction. The death of Talos, however, was not just the end of a giant. it was also a moment that reflected the power of magic, craftsmanship, and the interplay between mortals and gods. Through Medea's magic and Hephaestus' craft, Talos was brought to life, and through these same forces he was destroyed. His life and death mirrored the eternal cycle of creation and destruction that was central to Greek mythology, and his story continued to inspire awe and wonder among those who heard it. Talos, the giant bronze automaton, may have fallen, but his story, like the sun he represented, would continue to shine through the ages, a testament to the power of craftsmanship, the magic of the gods, and the strength of the ancient races of men. Talos, the giant bronze man, was a creation of Hephaestus, forged to serve as a protector of the island of Crete. He was a mighty being, constructed from the finest bronze, and endowed with the power to patrol the island 3 times a day. His task was to defend the land, keeping it safe from any invaders who dared approach. Talos was not a mere statue, but a living automaton, his body made of metal and fire, his legs like iron, and his strength unmatched by any mortal or god. He would walk the island with determined steps, his eyes scanning the horizon for any threat. His most fearsome attribute was his ability to heat his body to a red-hot temperature, a terrifying weapon he used to burn anyone who came too close. For years, Talos carried out his duty, ensuring that the island remained secure from pirates, invaders, and any other dangers that might threaten its peace. One day, the Argonauts arrived on the shores of Crete, seeking shelter and resupply. The Argonauts were weary from their long journey and needed a place to rest. As they approached the island in their ship, they were met with an unexpected obstacle. Talos, in his mighty form, saw them coming and immediately sprang into action. He began hurling great stones at the Argonauts, using his immense strength to keep them away from the island. The giant's power was overwhelming, and the Argonauts, despite their courage and determination, were forced to pull back. Talos, with his iron limbs and fiery embrace, was an indomitable force, and the Argonauts realized they could not land without first overcoming him. His task as protector of the island seemed impossible to break, and the heroes, exhausted from their journey, could do little but retreat. However, the Argonauts were not without hope. In their moment of despair, Medea, the powerful sorceress who accompanied them, stepped forward. She was confident that she could defeat the mighty bronze giant, but she needed the Argonauts to give her the chance. Medea, with her deep knowledge of magic and the arcane, believed that she alone had the power to bring Talos down. She asked the Argonauts to hold their position, keeping the ship out of range of his rocks while she devised a plan. They agreed, and Medea began to work her magic. She covered her cheeks with a fold of her purple mantle, and Jason, the leader of the Argonauts, led her by the hand as she passed across the ship's benches. Once on deck, Medea began to chant incantations, her voice carrying across the sea as she invoked the Keres, the spirits of death, the hounds of Hades who hunted souls and brought destruction to those who crossed their path. She called out to them 3 times in song, and 3 times with spoken prayers, summoning their dark power to aid her in her task. Medea's magic was unlike anything the Argonauts had ever seen. As she knelt on the deck of the ship, she focused all her malevolence and dark energy on Talos. Her eyes burned with the power of death, and she filled the air with images of doom. Talos, still hoisting heavy stones, began to feel an unnatural force pulling at him. The magic that Medea wielded was powerful and direct, and Talos, for all his strength and indestructible bronze body, began to falter. His movement slowed, and a strange sensation spread through him. Medea's dark magic took hold of his mind, and he found himself overwhelmed by the malevolent energy she conjured. For the first time, Talos, the giant bronze man who had never known weakness, began to feel fear. The great strength that had once made him invincible was no match for the power of Medea's spell. As Talos struggled with the effects of the magic, Medea's incantations reached their peak. The image of death that she conjured struck Talos with such force that he lost control of his own body. He was no longer the unstoppable guardian of Crete, but a helpless giant, overwhelmed by the dark power that Medea had unleashed upon him. In his weakened state, he made one final attempt to stop the Argonauts, but it was too late. The magic had already taken its toll. Talos, despite his great size and strength, fell to the ground, no longer able to fulfill his duty as protector of the island. But the story did not end there. Talos, though defeated, had one last secret. Inside his body, he had a single vein that ran from his head to his ankles. This vein was his lifeblood, the very source of his existence, and it was protected by a bronze stud that kept it sealed. In some versions of the tale, Medea, in her final act of magic, removed the stud from Talos's vein, causing his blood to flow out, and with it, his life. Others tell a different version, where an arrow from Poeas, the archer, struck Talos in the ankle, the one vulnerable point in his otherwise invulnerable body. With this strike, Talos bled out, his lifeblood spilling onto the earth, and the great bronze giant fell to his doom. No longer a protector of the island, Talos was lost to the world, his death marking the end of an era of bronze guardians. The defeat of Talos was a turning point in the journey of the Argonauts. With the giant slain, they were free to land on the island of Crete and continue their quest for the Golden Fleece. Medea's magic had proven crucial in overcoming the mighty Talos, and the Argonauts owed their success to her cunning and skill. Talos, once an invincible force, had been brought down not by brute strength, but by the power of magic and strategy. His death was a testament to the balance between strength and magic, a reminder that even the most powerful beings could be defeated through cunning and skill. Talos, the giant bronze automaton, had fulfilled his role as protector, but in the end, it was his vulnerability that led to his fall, and the Argonauts' triumph over him would become another legendary tale in their epic journey. The mighty Talos, forged from bronze by the great Hephaestus, was a powerful guardian of the island of Crete. His task was to patrol the island, circling it 3 times a day, ensuring no invaders or unwanted guests could approach. His body, crafted from metal, made him invulnerable, and he could heat himself to a blistering temperature, using his fiery embrace to repel anyone who dared set foot on the shores. He was a symbol of strength, a protector whose very presence kept the island safe. Talos had been created by the gods to watch over the island, and for years he did his duty without fail. His steps were heavy but purposeful as he moved around the island, his eyes scanning the horizon for any potential threat. But despite his incredible strength and the power granted to him by the gods, Talos had one weakness. Beneath the bronze covering of his body, there ran a single vein, extending from his head down to his ankle. This vein, sealed by a bronze stud, was the source of his life. Without it, he would not be able to function, and his body would cease to work. The day came when the Argonauts arrived on the shores of Crete, seeking refuge and supplies for their quest. But their arrival was met with hostility, as Talos immediately took action, hurling massive rocks at the ship to keep it from landing. His immense strength and fiery nature made him a formidable opponent, and the Argonauts, though skilled and powerful, found themselves at a loss. The island of Crete had been sealed off by Talos, and despite their best efforts, they could not approach without facing his wrath. The Argonauts, weary and desperate, had no choice but to pull back, their hopes dashed by the Bronze Guardian. However, amidst the fear and confusion, one of the Argonauts, Medea, the sorceress, knew that there might still be a way to defeat the giant. She was confident that, with her magic, she could find a way to bring down Talos. As the ship moved away from the rocks, Medea stood tall and declared that she alone could defeat the giant. The Argonauts, although skeptical, trusted her enough to give her the time she needed. Medea, with her powerful knowledge of magic, began to weave a plan to overcome the indestructible Talos. She covered her face with the fold of her purple mantle, drawing strength from the ancient spells that flowed within her. With a fierce determination, Medea called upon the spirits of death, the Keres, invoking their power to strike down the mighty Talos. She sank to her knees and, with incantations and prayers, summoned the dark forces of the underworld. The very air seemed to thicken with the intensity of her magic as she aimed her malevolent energy at the great bronze giant. Talos, unaware of the spell being cast upon him, continued his patrol, unaware that his fate was being sealed by Medea's will. As Medea's spells intensified, Talos began to feel a strange sensation, as though something within him was shifting. His immense strength, which had always been his greatest asset, now began to betray him. The power that had once kept him invulnerable was now being drained, replaced by an unknown force that slowly drained him of his strength. It was as if Medea's magic had penetrated the very core of his being, attacking him not through physical force, but through the very essence of his existence. He stopped moving, his once powerful legs shaking, and for the first time, Talos felt fear. His body, made of the finest bronze, had never known weakness, but now he was vulnerable, his power slipping away with every passing moment. The vein inside him, the very lifeblood of his existence, began to pulse, its energy fading with each breath he took. The force of Medea's spell was too much for him to resist, and Talos found himself collapsing under the weight of his own inability to fight back. As Talos struggled to maintain his composure, the final blow came. In some versions of the myth, Medea, in her cruel cunning, removed the bronze stud that sealed his vein, causing the ichor, the life force that flowed through his veins, to pour out. Without the stud to hold the vein closed, Talos's lifeblood spilled out like molten lead, and his strength rapidly diminished. He swayed for a moment, his massive form teetering on the edge of collapse. His once powerful legs, which had carried him so tirelessly around the island, could no longer support him. Talos, once an unyielding protector of Crete, began to lose his balance. With a resounding crash, the great bronze giant fell to the ground, his body lifeless. He had been brought down not by brute strength or physical violence, but by the power of magic and the cunning of Medea. His fall was like that of a great tree being felled by the wind, its mighty form no match for the forces that had conspired against it. Some myths say that it was an arrow from Poseidon, the archer, that struck Talos in the ankle, the only vulnerable part of his body. The arrow, aimed with precision, pierced the joint and the giant fell, his body unable to withstand the blow. However, in the version where Medea's magic is the determining factor, the removal of the stud from Talos's vein is the final act that causes him to bleed out and die. Regardless of the specifics of his demise, the result was the same. Talos, the great bronze guardian of Crete, was no more. The Argonauts, freed from the threat of the giant, were able to land on the island and continue their journey, thanks in part to Medea's magic and her cunning. Talos's death marked the end of an era for the Bronze Age. He was the last of the bronze generation of men, and his fall symbolized the end of that age of metal beings. His once unyielding form, crafted from the finest bronze, had been brought low by the magic of Medea and the vulnerabilities that lay hidden within him. The legend of Talos serves as a reminder of the power of both strength and magic, and how the greatest of heroes and guardians can fall when their weaknesses are exposed. His fall was not just a defeat for Talos, but a turning point for the Argonauts, as they moved forward in their quest for the Golden Fleece, their path now clear of the giant who had once stood in their way. Jason, the leader of the Argonauts, was tasked with a challenge unlike any other, one set before him by King Aeetes of Colchis. The king had two mighty bulls, creatures of incredible power, forged by the hands of Hephaestus himself. These bulls were no ordinary beasts. Their feet were made of bronze, and from their mouths came a blazing fire so fierce that it could scorch the earth. They were creatures of terror, bred for a purpose that only a king of Aeetes' caliber could fully understand. Aeetes ordered Jason to yoke these fire-breathing bulls and plough a 4-acre field, a task that would require immense strength, courage, and skill. The king did not give these bulls lightly. They were the product of Hephaestus' divine craftsmanship, a gift that symbolized the power of both the earth and the fire. Hephaestus had also forged for Aeetes a plough of indurated steel, a tool that could withstand the intense heat of the bulls' fiery breath as they ploughed the hard, unforgiving land. The task was daunting, and to succeed would require more than just brute strength. It would demand a kind of willpower and determination that only a hero could summon. Before Jason embarked on this daunting task, Medea, the sorceress and daughter of Aeetes, approached him with a gift that would alter the course of his quest. She gave him a powerful charm, a magical ointment that, when rubbed on his body, would make him invulnerable to both fire and iron for one whole day. With this charm, Jason would become nearly unstoppable. He could face the bull's fire and the deadly threat of the earthborn men without fear of harm. Medea instructed Jason to strip and anoint himself with the magical ointment, which would grant him the strength and confidence to carry out the task. The magic in the ointment was potent, a gift that transformed Jason into a being of tremendous power, allowing him to take on the seemingly impossible task set by King Aeetes, with his body protected from both the searing flames of the bulls and the sharp spears of the earthborn men. Jason now had a fighting chance. With the magic of the ointment coursing through him, Jason set out to yoke the fierce bronze bulls. As he approached them, their fiery breath filled the air, and the ground beneath their hooves seemed to tremble with their power. But Jason, undaunted by the heat and the menace of the bulls, moved swiftly. With incredible skill and strength, he yoked the beasts, forcing them to plough the hard, fallow land as instructed by Aeetes. The bulls, whose fire could melt steel and whose strength could crush any foe, were now under Jason's control, their fiery breath no match for the invulnerability granted by Medea's magic. As the bulls worked the land, Jason ploughed the 4-acre field, his determination pushing him to complete the task despite the intense heat and the weight of the challenge. He was no longer the man who had arrived at Colchis seeking the Golden Fleece. He was a hero transformed by magic, a man who could face anything with confidence and strength. But the task did not end with the ploughing of the field. Once the land had been tilled, Jason was instructed to sow the dragon's teeth, which would give rise to a crop of earthborn men, fierce warriors who would rise from the ground and challenge him. These men, born from the teeth of a monstrous serpent, would spring to life clad in bronze armour, ready to fight. They were warriors born of the earth itself, a challenge that would test Jason's strength and skill in battle. Jason, now protected by the magic of Medea's ointment, faced the earthborn men with a sense of purpose. He knew that they would not relent, but he also knew that he could not fail. With his shield and spear in hand, Jason fought bravely, cutting down the earthborn men one by one as they rose from the soil. Despite their strength and numbers, Jason was unstoppable. The magic granted him the resilience and power to overcome the warriors, and one by one he felled them, proving that no challenge was too great for him to conquer. The day wore on, and with each earthborn warrior that fell, Jason grew closer to completing the task set before him. The bulls, once a terrifying force, now lay still, their fire extinguished, their strength subdued. The earthborn men, once unstoppable, now lay defeated at Jason's feet. The king of Colchis, Aeetes, had set this task to test Jason's abilities, but it was clear that Jason had more than met the challenge. He had proven his worth, not just as a hero, but as a man of strength and courage, one who could overcome the odds and achieve what seemed impossible. As the sun set on the day of the challenge, Jason stood victorious, having completed the task that King Aeetes had set for him. He had yoked the fire-breathing bulls, ploughed the field, and defeated the earthborn warriors. His strength, combined with the magic of Medea's charm, had carried him through each step of the task. The golden fleece, once thought to be beyond reach, was now within his grasp. Jason had not only proven his worth to King Aeetes, but had also earned the right to claim the fleece and continue his journey. The magic that had protected him and the strength that had fueled him would be remembered as a key moment in his quest, a testament to the power of determination, courage, and the will to succeed against all odds. Aeson stood firm in the field, his shield held steady before him, and his feet planted like a reef standing against a furious storm. The bulls, giant and terrifying, had emerged from their smoky lair, their fiery breath scorching the earth as they approached, their massive bronze hooves pounding the ground. The Argonauts, watching from a distance, were filled with fear, their eyes wide at the sight of these two fire-breathing beasts, their bodies gleaming in the sunlight. But Aeson didn't flinch. His resolve was as solid as the ground beneath his feet. The bulls charged at him, their bellowing shakes of the earth. They hurled themselves against his shield with such force that the ground seemed to tremble. The flames pouring from their mouths blazed like a furnace, shooting into the air, creating an intense heat that seemed to burn everything in its path. The heat hit Aeson like a bolt of lightning, yet he stood unmoved, his shield held in front of him, his stance unwavering as though he were rooted to the earth itself. The force of the bull's charge was tremendous, but Aeson did not budge. He was protected by Medea's magic, a gift she had given him to ensure that he would not be harmed by the flames or the strength of the bulls. The fire leapt around him, licking at his skin, but it could not touch him. The magic that enveloped him made him as strong and unyielding as the shield he carried. With a deep breath, Aeson saw his moment. He lunged forward and seized the first bull by the tip of its horn, dragging it toward the yoke. The creature resisted, but Aeson's grip was like iron. With a swift, powerful kick to the bull's bronze foot, he forced it to its knees. The other bull, not to be outdone, charged at Aeson with a roar, but it met the same fate. With a single blow, Aeson felled it as well, bringing both beasts to their knees. Despite the flames that still swirled around him, Aeson remained steady, holding the bulls in place with his immense strength, his stance unshaken. The bulls, once powerful and free, were now subdued, kneeling before him. Aeetes, watching in awe, marveled at the strength of the man before him. The task he had set was meant to test Aeson's courage and ability, yet Aeson had completed it with remarkable skill and force. As the bulls knelt, exhausted and defeated, Castor and Polydeuces, the twin brothers, approached. They were assigned to help with the task of yoking the bulls, and they moved quickly to assist Aeson. Together, they fastened the yoke around the bulls' necks, securing them tightly. Aeson, now free from the immediate danger, took the bronze pole that would connect the two beasts and fastened it to the yoke with the pointed end. Once the yoke was in place, Aeson stood tall, his shield resting on his back, his helmet filled with sharp teeth in his hand, and his spear ready. He was prepared for the next part of the challenge, a task that would require all his strength and skill. With the yoke secured, Aeson took his spear and used it like a ploughman's goad, urging the bulls forward. The beasts, still full of fury, began to move, their fire-spouting breath roaring like the wind in a storm. As they charged ahead, the ground beneath them was torn apart, the rough, fallow soil breaking up in their wake. The great plough, powered by the combined strength of Aeson and the bulls, dug into the earth, turning the soil over and preparing it for planting. The bulls, though wild and unruly, were being guided with the steady hand of Aeson, who held the reins firmly. The heat from their fiery breath did not deter him, and he pressed on, guiding them through the task that had been set before him. The work was not easy, but Aeson's determination was unmatched. The field, once barren and untamed, was now slowly being transformed by the power of the plough and the strength of the bulls. The great clods of earth were turned over, breaking apart under the force of the plough and the power of the animals. As the task continued, Aeson moved with precision, his focus unwavering, his movements confident and sure. The Argonauts, watching from the ship, marveled at his strength and skill, impressed by the way he was able to control the bulls and complete the task with such determination. The fire from the bulls' mouths continued to scorch the earth, but Aeson remained unaffected, his body protected by the magic that had been bestowed upon him. With every step, he drove the bulls forward, and the field slowly began to take shape, its once untamed surface now broken and prepared for the planting of the seeds. The challenge was nearing its end. The bulls, though once wild and uncontrollable, were now tamed by Aeson's strength and the magic that protected him. The field was nearly ploughed, and the task that seemed impossible at the beginning was now within reach. The powerful bulls, who had once been a threat to the Argonauts, were now subjugated, their flames no longer a danger. The work that Aeson had been asked to complete was done, and he stood triumphant, his strength and skill proven once again. The bulls, now yoked and tamed, had helped him complete the task, and he was one step closer to his ultimate goal, the Golden Fleece. The hard labor was now behind him, and the fruits of his efforts were within sight. His victory over the bulls would go down in legend as one of his greatest feats, a testament to his determination, strength, and the power of the magic that guided him. As the bulls ploughed the earth, their bronze hooves tore through the ground with a thunderous sound, creating deep furrows in the soil. With each step, they breathed out fire, their scorching flames lighting up the air around them. But Jason, standing firm behind them, did not falter. He planted his feet down firmly, his resolve as unshakable as the earth beneath him. As he worked the plough, he cast the dragon's teeth into the furrows, carefully sprinkling them far from himself. With each backward glance, he remained wary, knowing that the deadly earthborn men would soon arise from the teeth, and he had to be prepared for the challenge that awaited. The bulls, despite their fiery breath and immense strength, toiled on without rest, their hooves digging into the earth, their powerful forms pushing the plough through the rough soil. As the hours passed, and the day began to draw closer to its end, Jason's task was far from over. While labourers in other fields might have looked forward to the time when they could release their oxen from the yoke and rest, Jason knew he had no such luxury. He had to complete the entire task before the day's light faded, and the pressure mounted with every passing moment. With every strike of the plough, the field became more and more transformed, the rough earth broken and turned over under the might of the bulls and Jason's steady guidance. The sun was beginning to dip low on the horizon, and only a third of the day remained. But still, Jason did not slow. He pressed forward, his strength and determination pushing him to finish what he had started. At last, after what seemed an eternity, the entire 4-acre field was ploughed. The work was done, and Jason, his muscles aching from the exertion, freed the bulls from the plough. With a simple gesture, he shooed them off across the plain, and they fled, no longer needed in the task that had been set before him. The bulls, once fierce and uncontrollable, now wandered aimlessly, their purpose fulfilled. Jason, weary yet triumphant, stood in the middle of the freshly ploughed field, the task complete, the hard labour now behind him. It was a victory, not just of strength, but of perseverance. He had met the challenge set before him, and he had overcome it, proving his worth and his resolve. But even as Jason completed the ploughing, another challenge loomed on the horizon. The golden fleece, the object of his quest, was guarded by many dangers, and the task was far from finished. King Aeetes, knowing the great power of the fleece, had set additional trials for Jason, all meant to test his strength and cunning. Beyond the bulls and the ploughing, Jason now had to face the guardians of the fleece, men made from dragons' teeth, fierce and armed, ready to fight to the death. The earthborn men, rising from the soil, were a formidable force, and Jason knew that his strength alone would not be enough to defeat them. They would fight each other, slaying one another in their frenzy, but Jason had to be ready for whatever came next. The ploughing had been only one part of the task. Now, he would have to deal with the warriors born from the earth. As Jason prepared to face the next obstacle, Medea, who had already aided him in his task with the bulls, knew that the earthborn warriors would pose an even greater danger. Her knowledge of magic was the key to his survival. Medea, aware of the danger that lay ahead, decided to help Jason once again, but this time with a spell that would make the warriors turn on each other. She advised him to throw a stone among them, and the earthborn men, in their confusion, would begin to fight among themselves, killing each other in the process. It was a clever tactic, one that would save Jason from certain death, but it was not without its risks. The earthborn men, once brought to life, were fierce and relentless, and their thirst for battle was unquenchable. If Jason were not careful, he could easily be caught in their crossfire. But with Medea's guidance, he stood a fighting chance. As Jason prepared for the battle, Medea, knowing the immense danger that lay ahead, pondered the situation. She knew that without her help, Jason would not survive. The fiery breath of the bulls could easily burn him alive, and the earthborn warriors would rise from the soil, eager to fight and kill. The dragon guarding the golden fleece was another threat that loomed large, a creature that would not let Jason claim the prize so easily. Medea, filled with a sense of guilt and concern, knew she had to act. She couldn't allow Jason to face these dangers alone. Her magic, powerful and potent, was the only thing that could ensure his survival. Without it, he would surely perish, and all the effort he had put into reaching the fleece would be in vain. In a moment of resolve, Medea cast her fears aside and focused on the task at hand. She would use her magic to protect Jason, to guide him through the dangers that awaited him, and to ensure that he could claim the fleece for himself and his people. As the Earthborn men began to rise, Jason stood ready. With the magic of Medea still protecting him, he faced the next challenge with unwavering courage, knowing that he was not alone. The battle ahead would be fierce, and the dangers were many, but with Medea's help, he had the strength to overcome them. Together, they would face whatever came next, determined to succeed and claim the prize that lay before them. And so, Jason's journey continued, each trial more difficult than the last, but his resolve only growing stronger as he moved closer to his ultimate goal. The land of Colchis was a place steeped in danger and mystery, and its king had devised a task so challenging that even the most powerful of heroes would be tested to their limits. Among the challenges that awaited the hero was the pair of fire-breathing bulls crafted by the divine smith Hephaestus. These bulls were no ordinary animals. Their hooves were made of bronze, and from their nostrils spewed intense flames, capable of scorching anything in their path. The people of Colchis had gathered to witness the spectacle, standing around the sacred field of Ares, their eyes wide with anticipation. The bulls, with their adamantine hooves and fiery breath, stood ready to face anyone foolish enough to try and control them. The very air around them seemed to shimmer with heat, and the earth beneath their feet cracked and smoldered as they snorted and bellowed, their fiery breath filling the field with smoke. The scene was one of chaos and intensity, a test of strength and will. But one man stood unflinching in the face of these monstrous beasts. Jason, despite the fire that threatened to engulf him, moved forward with determination. His body, protected by the magic of Medea, was shielded from the intense heat. He did not fear the flames that surged around him, nor the terrifying sound of the bulls' roars. He stepped boldly toward them, and as he did, the bulls lowered their heads, their iron-tipped horns ready to strike. The ground shook with each stamp of their hooves, and the air crackled with the force of their fiery breath. The people, both the Greeks and the Colchians, watched in awe and fear. The Greeks were stiff with terror, unsure of whether the hero would survive the challenge. Yet Jason pressed on, unwavering. The magic of Medea, which had protected him from harm, allowed him to approach the bulls and touch their dewlaps without harm. With a single steady movement, he yoked the bulls, forcing them to bend to his will, and made them draw the plough across the sacred ground. The Colchians, who had watched the bulls terrorize anyone who dared approach them, were stunned by what they saw. Jason, the foreign hero, had not only yoked the fire-breathing bulls, but had made them work the land, ploughing a field that had never been touched by a plough before. The ground, once rough and untamed, was now broken up, ready for the next step of the challenge. The Greeks, witnessing this feat, cheered for their prince, their hearts swelling with pride at the bravery and skill Jason had shown. He had completed the task that many thought impossible, and the mighty bulls were now under his control. But the task was far from over. Once the bulls had ploughed the field, Jason was left with the next part of the challenge, sowing the dragon's teeth. With the plough now deep in the field, Jason took the helmet filled with the dragon's teeth, a gift from Medea, and scattered them across the freshly ploughed earth. The teeth, steeped in powerful venom, would soon grow into a crop of earthborn men, warriors born from the soil itself. As Jason cast the teeth into the furrows, he kept a wary eye on the ground, knowing what was to come. The earth, though softened by the plough, was not just fertile, it was cursed. Soon, from beneath the soil, the earthborn men began to rise. They were the deadly harvest of the dragon's teeth, armed and ready for battle. As they emerged from the soil, they were fully formed, their bodies clad in bronze armour and their weapons raised high. They looked around in confusion and rage, and immediately they began to fight, slaying each other in a frenzy. Medea, having helped Jason with the bulls, now turned her attention to the earthborn warriors. She had known what would happen, and with a deep understanding of magic, she devised a clever way to stop the bloodshed. By her spell, she caused the warriors to turn on one another, their own rage and confusion leading them to kill each other without mercy. The battle raged on, but it was no longer a battle between Jason and the warriors. It was a self-destructive conflict where the earthborn men fought and killed each other, fulfilling their terrible fate in the span of a single day. In the end, the field was littered with the bodies of the fallen warriors, their bronze armour gleaming in the sunlight as they lay defeated. The task was complete, and Jason, though weary from the trials he had faced, had succeeded in the most difficult of challenges. The bulls had been yoked and made to plough the field, the dragon's teeth had been sown, and the earthborn men had risen and fought their own battle, leaving Jason with only one final obstacle to overcome: the dragon guarding the golden fleece. The field, once a barren and untamed place, was now a testament to the hero's strength, skill, and determination. The earth, once filled with danger, was now a place where the hero had triumphed, his efforts bringing him closer to his goal. The task had been daunting, but through bravery and cunning, Jason had completed it. As he stood in the midst of the battlefield, the once terrifying bulls now quieted and the warriors no longer a threat, Jason's eyes turned toward the final challenge that awaited him: the dragon guarding the golden fleece. He had faced the fire of the bulls, the deadly earthborn men, and now the fleece, the prize of his quest, was within his grasp. But he knew that the hardest part of his journey was yet to come. With the sun setting over the field, casting long shadows across the ground, Jason prepared for the final test, his heart filled with determination and his resolve stronger than ever. The golden fleece was within reach, but the road to it would be fraught with one last challenge. The adventure was not yet over, but the path Jason had walked so far had proven his worth, and he was ready for whatever lay ahead. Jason had been set a task that seemed almost impossible. He was to plough a field using a pair of fire-breathing bulls with feet made of solid bronze and nostrils that spewed flames as fierce as any forge. These were no ordinary animals. They were crafted by the god Hephaestus and belonged to Ares, the god of war. Their fire was so intense that it could scorch the earth beneath their hooves, and their mighty horns were more than capable of causing destruction. Jason's task was to yoke them together and plough a field, a task that was both physically demanding and incredibly dangerous. But what made this challenge even more difficult was the seed he was meant to sow. Instead of grain, Jason was to scatter the teeth of a dragon across the field. These teeth, cursed and venomous, would give rise to a crop of earthborn men, warriors who would rise from the soil, fully armed and ready to fight. These warriors were no mere farmers. They were deadly enemies, born of the earth itself, and Jason knew that they would not hesitate to kill him if they could. As Jason approached the bulls, his mind was filled with determination. He knew that the only way to succeed was to overcome the immense challenge ahead of him. The bulls were terrifying, their fiery breath threatening to incinerate anything in their path, and the earthborn men that would arise from the dragon's teeth would be his enemies. Yet, despite the danger, Jason pressed forward. With steady hands and great skill, he yoked the bulls. The animals, although fierce and wild, were forced to bend to his will, their fiery breath no longer a threat as Jason's magic shielded him from harm. Once the bulls were yoked, Jason took the plough and began his work. The ground was tough and unyielding, but Jason did not falter. With the bulls pulling the plough, he carved deep furrows into the earth, each one marking the progress of his task. As he worked, he carefully scattered the dragon's teeth, knowing that he had to be cautious. The teeth were not just seeds, they were a curse, and if he was not careful, they would spring to life, creating an army of deadly warriors. Jason's strength and resolve were tested as the task wore on. The bulls continued to pull the plough, their fiery breath spitting out from their mouths, but Jason remained unfazed. He knew that he could not stop until the entire field was ploughed, and so he worked tirelessly, driving the bulls onward. As the plough cut through the earth, the dragon's teeth were buried in the soil, and Jason could feel the tension in the air. He knew that soon the earthborn men would begin to rise. The bulls, though fierce and wild, had been tamed by Jason's steady hand, and the field was slowly being transformed from barren soil to a place where warriors would soon emerge. And then, just as the task seemed to be nearing its end, the earth began to stir. From the very ground that Jason had ploughed, the dragon's teeth began to take root. The earth, once solid and still, now trembled as the earthborn men rose from the soil. These warriors, born of the earth itself, were fully armed and ready for battle. They were a terrifying sight. Clad in bronze armour and wielding weapons, they looked every bit as fierce and deadly as the bulls that had pulled the plough. They began to fight each other, as though they had been programmed to do so, each one seeking to kill the others. The field was now a battlefield, and Jason, who had worked so hard to plough the land and sow the teeth, now found himself surrounded by enemies. But Jason was not alone in this battle. Medea, the sorceress who had helped him with the bulls, now used her magic to help him defeat the earthborn warriors. She cast a spell, causing the warriors to turn on each other. With Medea's guidance, the earthborn men began to fight amongst themselves, their anger and confusion causing them to slay one another. It was a stroke of genius on Medea's part, for without her help, Jason would have been overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemies. As the warriors fought each other, Jason took advantage of the chaos to strike down the ones who were still alive, one by one. It was a battle unlike any other, a battle not just against the earthborn men, but against the very earth itself, which had brought them to life. The earth, having birthed these warriors, now seemed to want them to destroy each other. Jason fought with all his strength, but he could not do it alone. Medea's magic kept him safe, allowing him to survive the battle and emerge victorious. The earthborn men, once a threat to Jason and the Argonauts, were now destroyed by their own hands. The once fertile soil, now stained with the blood of these warriors, lay quiet as the last of them fell. Jason, though tired and battered, had completed the task set before him. He had yoked the fire-breathing bulls, ploughed the field, and sowed the dragon's teeth. The warriors had risen, but thanks to Medea's magic, they had been destroyed, leaving Jason standing victorious. But the journey was far from over. Jason had completed one task, but the golden fleece still awaited him. The dragon guarding the fleece was still a challenge that lay ahead, and Jason knew that he would have to face it in order to claim the prize. The trials he had faced so far had tested his strength, his courage, and his resolve. But there was more to come, and Jason would need all the help he could get. The road to the Golden Fleece had been long and perilous, and the final challenge was yet to be met. With the Earthborn men defeated and the bulls no longer a threat, Jason set his sights on the last obstacle that stood between him and his goal. The fleece was within reach, but the path to it was still fraught with danger. Jason stood at the edge of the sacred field, where the challenge set before him seemed more impossible by the moment. The mighty bulls, forged by Hephaestus and imbued with the power of Ares, were no ordinary beasts. Their bronze hooves pounded the ground like the thunder of a storm, and from their nostrils came forth flames so hot they could turn the very air to ash. The field before him, the one that had long been untouched by any plough, was now his to till, but it was not just the earth he had to tame. The bulls, who breathed fire and carried the weight of a god's wrath, were as wild and untamed as the task ahead. The land itself seemed to tremble at their presence, and the air around Jason grew thick with heat, the fires of the bulls threatening to consume all. Yet Jason, standing firm in the face of this overwhelming challenge, knew he could not hesitate. The task he had been set was one that would test his strength, his courage, and his very will to succeed. As the bulls moved toward him, their flames flaring and their eyes blazing with fury, Jason's heart raced. He could feel the heat of their breath on his skin, the ground under his feet beginning to burn from their fire. The roar of their bellowing sounded like thunder, and the earth beneath them seemed to shudder in fear. But Jason, protected by the magic that Medea had given him, did not flinch. With a steady hand, he reached for the yoke and placed it over the bulls' massive necks. The bulls resisted, their strength unmatched, but Jason's grip was firm, his will unshaken. Despite the flames that surrounded him, despite the intense heat, Jason remained calm and resolute. He knew that he had no choice but to succeed, that the quest for the Golden Fleece and the survival of the Argonauts depended on his success. The bulls, once fiercely unyielding, were soon yoked together, their powerful bodies restrained by Jason's strength and the magic that shielded him. With the bulls now under his control, Jason turned to the next part of the task. The plough, designed to break the tough soil of the sacred field, awaited him. Jason, knowing he could not waste time, moved quickly to begin ploughing. The earth was hard and rough, but the bulls, now obedient to the yoke, pulled the plough through it. As they worked, Jason carefully scattered the dragon's teeth, just as he had been instructed. The dragon's teeth were no ordinary seeds. They were the cause of many warriors' birth. These earthborn men would rise from the soil, armed and ready to fight. Jason cast the seeds with precision, knowing full well what would come next. The earth trembled slightly as the seeds sank into the soil, and Jason, with every breath, prepared for the battle that was sure to come. The bulls, their fiery breath still scorching the air around them, continued to pull the plough, the ground slowly being turned and reshaped under their strength. The mighty bulls, whose power had once seemed unbeatable, were now controlled by Jason's skill and the magic protecting him. But even as the bulls toiled on, the seeds Jason had sown began to take root in the soil, and from the earth, the first of the warriors began to rise. These warriors, born from the dragon's teeth, were clad in bronze armour and carried weapons ready for battle. They were fierce and strong, created for one purpose, to fight. As more and more of them emerged from the soil, Jason could feel the weight of the task pressing down on him. These warriors were his enemies, and they would stop at nothing to destroy him. They were born of the earth, and their hatred for him was born from the very seed he had sown. Yet, with Medea's magic, the earthborn warriors did not pose an insurmountable challenge. She had crafted a spell, a powerful incantation that would turn these warriors against each other. The magic worked swiftly, and as the warriors began to clash, they fought amongst themselves, killing each other off one by one. Jason, though still on guard, knew that this was a chance to survive. He moved quickly, felling the remaining warriors as they fought amongst themselves, his sword flashing in the sunlight as he struck them down. The chaos that erupted in the field was both terrible and beautiful, as the warriors, once born of the earth's venomous seeds, now met their end through their own hands. Their power was unmatched, but their fury was turned inward, and soon the field was littered with their bodies, a testament to Jason's ability to face any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. As the last of the earthborn warriors fell, the field fell silent. The bulls, their fiery breath now diminished, were no longer a threat. Jason stood victorious, his body tired and his strength spent, but the task was done. He had ploughed the field, yoked the bulls, and sown the dragon's teeth. The warriors had risen and fought, but Jason had triumphed over them, thanks to the magic of Medea and his own unshakable determination. With the challenge complete, the golden fleece, the prize he had sought for so long, was now within his grasp. But though the task was finished, the journey was far from over. The fleece still awaited him, guarded by many dangers, but Jason had proven his worth. His strength, courage, and the magic that had aided him had brought him this far, and he knew that whatever lay ahead, he would face it with the same resolve that had seen him through the trials of the bulls and the earthborn men. With the fleece so close, Jason knew that his quest was nearing its end, but he was also aware that the final challenge would require everything he had left. Jason stood resolute in the heart of the field, the weight of the challenge ahead bearing down on him. The sacred plain before him, once a place untouched by human hands, was now his battlefield. He could hear the faint hum of the wind, but it was overshadowed by the roar of the mighty bulls that were about to be unleashed. These bulls, forged by the god Hephaestus, were no mere animals. They were creatures of immense power, with bronze hooves that could shatter stone and fiery breath that could scorch the very earth. The task was clear: to yoke these fire-breathing monsters and plough the field. Yet even as he steeled himself for what was to come, Jason could not escape the feeling that this would not be an easy victory. The bulls had never been yoked before, their fiery rage and untamed nature ready to destroy anything that stood in their path. At the command of the king, the ground seemed to tremble as the gates opened, and the bulls with their snorting nostrils and wild eyes stepped out from their stalls. The air around them shimmered with heat as they snorted, their fiery breath rolling out like a wave of flame. The bulls were as fierce as the fire that burned in their chests, and their power was unmatched. Jason, knowing he had no time to lose, stepped forward with determination, his feet planted firmly in the dust. He could feel the tension rising as the bulls began to move toward him, their hooves pounding the ground with a deafening rhythm. The field, once calm and still, now echoed with the sound of their fury. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he advanced, not retreating an inch. He held his shield before him, its surface gleaming in the sunlight, and with his spear raised high, he faced the bulls head-on, ready to meet them in the heart of the storm. The first bull, its fiery gaze locked on Jason, charged at him with terrifying speed. Its body moved like a force of nature, and its breath, hot enough to melt metal, rushed toward him in a gust of heat. Jason did not flinch. As the bull lunged forward, he pressed his shield firmly against the attack, the flame sizzling against its surface. For a moment, the fire seemed to pause, as if recognizing the strength of the shield that protected its bearer. Jason, seizing the opportunity, grabbed hold of the bull's horns, using all his might to control the beast. The bull fought against him, thrashing wildly and trying to shake him off. Its strength was overwhelming, and Jason could feel the weight of its fury pressing down on him. The bull's horns were like iron, and each time it shook its head, the force threatened to send Jason sprawling to the ground. But Jason's resolve was stronger than the beast's rage. With every struggle, he pressed harder, refusing to let go. He pressed his knee into the bull's massive side, using all his strength to force it to kneel. The bull bellowed, its fury increasing, but Jason, now in control, pushed it down, bringing the fiery creature to its knees. With one final exertion of strength, Jason succeeded in bringing the bull down, its once unyielding power now subdued beneath him. He quickly placed the yoke around its neck, securing it in place, the task halfway done. But the battle was far from over. As Jason stood, exhausted from the struggle, his eyes turned to the other bull. This one, though equally fierce, seemed more hesitant, its fiery breath still raging, but its movements less frantic than its companions. Medea, watching from a distance, knew that this bull too would need to be tamed, and she quickly cast a spell over it, clouding its vision and weakening its resolve. The bull, now confused by the spell, moved slower, its once fearsome charge now less intense. Jason seized this opportunity, moving swiftly towards it. With great care, he approached the beast, his heart pounding as he neared the fiery creature. The bull, still confused and disoriented, barely reacted as Jason moved closer, and with one quick motion, Jason grabbed hold of its horns, guiding it toward the yoke. The bull struggled at first, but Jason's grip was firm, and with the magic of Medea aiding him, the beast soon succumbed to his control. As the bull was brought to its knees, Jason wasted no time in yoking it, securing both bulls to the plow. With both bulls yoked and the field ready, Jason was now faced with the next challenge, to use the bulls to plow the sacred land. The plow, heavy and unwieldy, stood before him, waiting to be guided by the mighty bulls. Jason, though fatigued, was determined to complete the task. He took the reins in hand, his grip steady and firm, and urged the bulls forward. They were still full of fire, their nostrils snorting clouds of smoke, but under Jason's control, they obeyed. Together, they moved forward, the plow cutting through the hard earth, carving deep furrows into the ground. The once barren land began to transform, the rough soil now turning under the weight of the plow. Jason's strength was tested again as he guided the bulls through the field, each step of the way a battle against their fiery power. The heat from their breath was almost unbearable, but Jason did not falter. His focus was unwavering as he pressed forward, guiding the bulls through the field, their power now working for him rather than against him. The earth, once untouched, was now being shaped by Jason's will, the land slowly being transformed under the might of the bulls and the strength of the hero. As the plow moved forward, the soil was turned, the field slowly taking shape. Jason's breath came in ragged gasps, his body sore from the exertion, but he could see the progress. The bulls, now exhausted from the effort, slowed their pace, but Jason pressed on, pushing them to finish what had been started. The task was nearly complete, and with one final effort, the ploughing was done. Jason stood, sweat dripping from his brow, his body aching but victorious. The bulls, once wild and untamed, were now subdued, their fiery breath no longer a threat. The field, once barren, was now ploughed and ready for the next phase of the task. With the bulls yoked and the field ploughed, Jason's success seemed within reach, but he knew that the task was not yet finished. He still had to face the earthborn warriors that would rise from the dragon's teeth, and the dragon guarding the golden fleece itself. But for now, as the bulls stood beside him, their fire finally subdued, Jason allowed himself a moment of triumph. He had tamed the fire-breathing bulls, ploughed the sacred land, and proven his strength and resolve. The next challenge awaited, but Jason knew that he was one step closer to achieving his ultimate goal. Jason's feet dug into the freshly ploughed earth, and as his hand swept the air, he scattered the seeds with the precision of a seasoned sower, filling the newly tilled land with an ominous burden: war. The very soil beneath him seemed to shift and groan as if it were alive, and as he spread the seeds of chaos, the ground responded with a fury all its own. From each furrow ploughed by the great bulls, the fiery breath of war seemed to rise. As though this was no mere field he was working, the ground beneath his feet turned into a battlefield, the soil quivering with the unmistakable sound of war. The trumpet of Mars, Ares, blared from the ploughshare itself, the blast of war resounding from the earth. In every furrow, the thunder of horns filled the air, and the entire plain shook as if the very earth itself was waking to the call of battle. The seeds Jason had sown now began to take form as the earthborn soldiers rose from the soil, their bodies forming from the enchanted teeth, as though they had been given life by the very hands of Ares himself. These warriors, born of the cursed dragon's teeth, stood up from the earth fully armed and ready for combat, a terrifying sight to behold. The battlefield had come to life. The earth had yielded its harvest, and now Jason was faced with the terrible force of the warriors, springing from the very ground that he had ploughed. The battle that followed was like no other, for the warriors born of the earth, though they appeared to be simple soldiers, were bound by their very creation to fight without hesitation. Each warrior had one purpose: to slay the others, and in their rage and fury they began to clash, filling the field with the sound of swords and shields as they fought to the death. Jason, though overwhelmed by the sight, had no choice but to continue his work. The magical charm that had protected him from the bulls now served him in a different way. With the earthborn warriors locked in combat, Jason used this moment of chaos to gain control. For though they were fierce, they were not as formidable as the bulls had been. As the warriors fell in battle, Jason continued his work, planting the seeds of victory for the Argonauts, though the price of that victory was the blood spilled on the sacred ground. Meanwhile, far in the heart of Colchis, the mighty bulls, who had once threatened to consume everything in their path, were now subdued. Their fire had been tempered, their wild fury tamed by the great strength of the hero. Hephaestus, the god of metal and fire, had fashioned these bulls with his skill and divine power, breathing fire between their teeth and shaping them with the most precise art. The bulls, with their bronze feet and their fire-breathing mouths, had been instruments of destruction, but in the hands of Jason, they were forced into submission, their power now a tool for the task ahead. They had once rampaged across the fields, but now they were yoked, bound to the plough, and under Jason's guidance, they would help till the land. The earthborn warriors, born of the dragon's teeth, continued to fight with unrelenting fury. Jason knew that without Medea's help, he would not be able to survive this battle. She had given him the strength to tame the bulls, and now her magic would once again prove invaluable. Her spells, which had tempered the fire of the bulls, now twisted the fate of the earthborn warriors. With a simple gesture, she altered the course of battle, causing the warriors to turn on each other, their fury directed inward. They fought amongst themselves, slaying each other in their frenzy, their arms clashing as the warriors who had once been born from the earth now turned on one another. Jason took advantage of the chaos, moving swiftly to strike down the remaining warriors, cutting them down as they fell into disarray. The earth, once a place of fertile soil, was now littered with the bodies of the fallen, the once mighty warriors brought low by their own hands. The struggle had been long, but Jason's determination had carried him through. The bulls, once his greatest challenge, were now controlled, their power harnessed for the ploughing of the field. The warriors born of the earth had been defeated not by force, but by the cunning and magic that Medea had brought to bear. The land, which had once been untamed and wild, was now tamed under Jason's hands. The task that had seemed impossible was now complete. The soil, once a battleground, had been ploughed and sown, and from it the warriors had risen and been brought down. The field was now quiet, the battle finished, but Jason knew that there was still more to come. With the land now tamed and the warriors vanquished, Jason's eyes turned to the ultimate prize, the Golden Fleece. The challenges he had faced had been immense, but they had only been the beginning. The fleece still lay within the grasp of the dragon, the final guardian of the prize. Yet Jason had proven his strength, his courage, and his resilience. With Medea's help, he had tamed the bulls and defeated the earthborn warriors, and now the fleece was within his reach. But the journey was not yet over, and the final test still awaited him. As he stood in the field, the task before him seemed less daunting than it had once appeared, for he had already faced unimaginable odds and emerged victorious. The fire-breathing bulls, the earthborn warriors, and the deadly magic of Medea had all been part of the path that led him here. The Golden Fleece was the ultimate prize, but Jason knew that it would require every ounce of his strength and every spell at his disposal to claim it. The land was ploughed, the battle fought, and now the final victory would depend on his ability to face the dragon and claim the prize that would secure his place in history. In the heart of the workshop of Daedalus, the master craftsman of Crete, art and creation transcended mere human understanding. Here, amidst the whirring tools and the clattering of hammers, the sculptor's genius was fully displayed. There were statues of all sizes. Some were barely formed, their shapes still rough and undefined, while others were completed and poised, as if ready to step down from their pedestals and walk. Daedalus had pushed the boundaries of sculpture beyond the inert forms of his predecessors, crafting statues that seemed to move and breathe. Before his time, statues were only lifeless forms, beautiful but incapable of motion. But Daedalus had revolutionized this art. His creations were not only lifelike in appearance, but some had the ability to move, as though they had been endowed with human sensations and even the ability to dance. His sculptures, though made of solid gold or marble, carried an essence that made them appear alive. They gave the illusion of motion, as if they were caught in the middle of a dance, their limbs poised mid-step. This ability to make statues feel and move was said to be Daedalus's greatest achievement, and many believed that he had even gone so far as to make gold feel as though it had a heartbeat, as if the material itself was alive. Daedalus's craft was not without its controversies and wonders, for he had dared to push the limits of what was possible in the art of creation. It was said that he could make his statues not just move, but even dance, bringing the lifeless material into a kind of existence that was both beautiful and unsettling. His art was so advanced that it seemed almost magical, and some whispered that Daedalus had mastered the very essence of life itself. The sculptures in his workshop were so lifelike that those who saw them believed that they had seen something truly divine. Yet Daedalus's genius did not end with creating statues that could move and feel. He also played with the very boundaries of life and death, as evidenced in his work on a project that would forever mark his name in myth: the creation of the wooden cow for Pasiphae. The tale of the wooden cow was one of the most infamous stories tied to Daedalus's name. Pasiphae, the queen of Crete and wife of King Minos, had fallen victim to a strange and unnatural lust, a desire ignited by the god Poseidon's wrath. Minos, having received a magnificent bull from Poseidon as a sign of his divine right to rule, failed to sacrifice it as promised. In anger, Poseidon cursed Minos' wife, causing her to fall madly in love with the very bull. This unnatural passion led Pasiphae to seek the help of Daedalus, the brilliant craftsman who had been trusted by Minos for many projects in the kingdom. Daedalus, understanding the depth of her desperation, devised a plan that would allow her to satisfy her desire in a most unusual and eerie manner. Daedalus constructed a wooden cow, a cleverly designed contraption with the outer appearance of a real cow, which he hollowed out and placed inside with soft padding to accommodate Pasiphae. He then took the skin of a real cow and sewed it onto the wooden frame, creating a lifelike disguise that would fool the bull. Once the cow was ready, Daedalus placed Pasiphae inside the wooden shell and left it in the meadow where the bull regularly grazed. When the bull, unaware of the ruse, approached the cow, it mounted it as though it were a real cow. The bull's actions resulted in the conception of a monstrous creature, the Minotaur, who was born with the body of a man and the head of a bull. This creature, the product of Pasiphae's lust and Daedalus's strange craftsmanship, would become one of the most feared beings in Greek mythology. But Daedalus's creations were not limited to mere sculptures and mythical machines. His ingenuity extended to the very heart of Crete's most infamous maze, the labyrinth, which he constructed to house the Minotaur, where it could be kept hidden from the world. The labyrinth was a testament to his unparalleled skill, a vast and complex network of passages designed to trap anyone who entered. A physical manifestation of the twisting, intricate thoughts that Daedalus had brought to life through his craft. It was within the walls of this maze that the Minotaur would be kept, and it was here that many would meet their doom, lost in the endless twists and turns created by the genius of Daedalus. In the end, Daedalus's work in the labyrinth, much like his other creations, stood as a powerful symbol of his brilliance, but also of the strange and sometimes dangerous consequences of his craft. His ability to bring lifeless materials to life, to create moving statues and contraptions of incredible complexity, had changed the world around him. Yet it was the creation of the Minotaur and the labyrinth that would leave the most lasting mark on his legacy. Daedalus had mastered the art of creation in ways that no other artist had, but in doing so, he had also unlocked the darker sides of his craft, sides that led to the birth of monsters and the construction of mazes meant to hide them away. Daedalus' name would forever be associated with both the beauty of creation and the chaos that could arise when that creation spirals out of control. Minos, the king of Crete, had long held power over his kingdom, but his rule came with great complexity. The tale of his wife, Pasiphae, and her unnatural lust for a bull had set the stage for a series of events that would lead to a legacy of creation and destruction. The bull, sent by Poseidon as a divine token, was of great beauty, but Minos, driven by pride and greed, had failed to sacrifice it as promised. In anger, Poseidon cursed Minos' wife, causing her to fall deeply in love with the very bull that had been sent to the king as a sign of divine favor. To satisfy her passion, Pasiphae sought the aid of Daedalus, the greatest craftsman of the time. Known for his skill and ingenuity, Daedalus constructed a wooden cow, hollowed out and covered with the skin of a real cow. Pasiphae, desperate and determined, hid herself inside the wooden cow, and when the bull approached, it mated with it as though it were a real cow. This union resulted in the birth of a creature unlike any other, a monstrous being, half man and half bull, known as the Minotaur. To contain this fearsome creature, Daedalus, using his extraordinary craftsmanship, constructed the labyrinth. This maze, so intricate and complex, had winding passageways that twisted and turned in such a way that even the most skilled could not find their way out. The Minotaur was kept in this maze, isolated from the world, its only company the victims sent to it as tribute. Every year, 7 youths and 7 maidens were sacrificed to the beast, and they would enter the labyrinth, never to return. The Minotaur devoured them, its hunger insatiable, its power uncontested within the maze. As the years passed, the people of Athens, who were forced to send the sacrifices, grew desperate for a solution to the terror that the Minotaur represented. But the story of Daedalus did not end with the creation of the labyrinth. His involvement in the birth of the Minotaur had angered Minos, who, feeling betrayed and humiliated by Daedalus' part in his wife's affair, sought retribution. Minos, now paranoid and driven by a desire for vengeance, had Daedalus imprisoned. His punishment would be to remain trapped in the very maze that he had designed. But Daedalus, with his brilliant mind, was not one to remain captive for long. He knew that Minos would stop at nothing to find him and make him pay for his role in the creation of the monster. However, Daedalus' situation was dire. Minos, determined to capture him, ordered every boat on the island to be searched, offering a great sum of money to anyone who could bring him the head of Daedalus. With no way to escape by sea, Daedalus turned to his craft for salvation. The genius of Daedalus lay not only in his ability to create structures and machines, but also in his knowledge of flight, something that few in the ancient world could comprehend. Desperate to escape, Daedalus constructed a set of wings, a marvel of invention and engineering. Using feathers and wax, he fashioned a pair of wings that could carry him away from the island of Crete. These wings, crafted with the utmost precision, were designed to mimic the flight of birds, allowing Daedalus to soar through the air. With this daring escape, he sought freedom, hoping to elude the wrath of Minos and the consequences of his involvement in the creation of the Minotaur. Yet the wings came with their own dangers. Daedalus, warned by his own wisdom, knew that the wings were fragile and that he must not fly too close to the sun. But in his excitement and hope for freedom, Daedalus ignored the warning. As he soared higher, the heat of the sun melted the wax holding the feathers together. The wings, once his means of escape, began to disintegrate, and Daedalus, realizing his mistake too late, plummeted to the earth, his wings falling apart around him. The fall was fatal, and Daedalus, the brilliant inventor and craftsman, met his end, not at the hands of Minos, but as a result of his own hubris. The wings, his greatest creation, had carried him to freedom only to bring about his undoing. His death marked the tragic end of a journey filled with incredible feats of craftsmanship, from the creation of the labyrinth to the wings that would carry him away from the island. Yet even in death, Daedalus' legacy lived on. His creations, the labyrinth, the wooden cow, and the wings, became legends that would be passed down for generations. They were symbols of both human ingenuity and the consequences of overstepping natural limits. The labyrinth, though it had trapped the Minotaur, also trapped its creator, showing how even the greatest minds can be consumed by their own creations. The story of Daedalus serves as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the consequences of trying to escape the very designs that one has set in motion. In the heart of Crete, Pasiphae, the queen, found herself lost in a passion that was not of her choosing. The divine anger of the goddess Aphrodite, enraged by Pasiphae's neglect, had cursed her with an unnatural lust for a bull, a creature both majestic and terrifying. This bull was no ordinary beast. It was a magnificent creature sent by Poseidon, meant to be sacrificed to the gods. However, driven by pride and arrogance, as Pasiphae's husband, King Minos, had kept the bull for himself, ignoring the divine request. In response, Poseidon unleashed his fury, making Pasiphae fall desperately in love with the very creature that had been sent as a symbol of divine power. Caught in this strange desire, Pasiphae turned to the only person she thought could help her, the master craftsman. Daedalus, renowned for his ingenious skill, was brought into the fold to create a solution to Pasiphae's problem. His workshop, a space filled with statues and contraptions of incredible detail, was where he was called to work on a task unlike any other. Amidst the figures he crafted, some were statues of men, others of gods, and a few more were works so intricate and lifelike that they seemed as if they could come to life at any moment. Daedalus had the rare ability to breathe life into his creations, making statues that moved and perhaps even felt. The figures in his workshop were still, yet their forms were so complete that it seemed that they could walk at any given moment. He had created wonders before, but this challenge, the one brought to him by the queen herself, was entirely different. It required him not only to use his skill in sculpture, but also to work with something beyond human nature, Pasiphae's strange and overwhelming lust. Daedalus, without hesitation, set to work on a plan. He fashioned a wooden cow, a hollow shell so skillfully crafted that it resembled a real cow. He then skinned a live cow and carefully attached its hide to the wooden frame, making it appear as if it were a living animal. Pasiphae, with her insatiable desire, would hide inside this wooden cow, which would allow her to be in the presence of the bull without being noticed. The bull, once accustomed to mating with cows, would approach the wooden cow, and in doing so, fulfill Pasiphae's desires. She lay within the wooden shell, awaiting the bull's arrival, and soon the scene was set for an unnatural union that would forever alter the course of Crete's history. The result of this union was the Minotaur, a creature born of both man and bull, with the body of a man and the head of a bull. This monstrous offspring would haunt the island of Crete for generations to come, its very existence a reminder of the dangers of hubris and the unnatural acts that can result from divine wrath. The Minotaur, a creature both terrifying and tragic, was hidden away in a labyrinth built by Daedalus himself. The labyrinth was a vast twisting maze, so complex that anyone who entered it would be trapped forever. It was designed to contain the Minotaur, whose insatiable hunger would have led it to consume anyone who ventured too close. The labyrinth itself became as much a prison for the Minotaur as it was for Daedalus, for the creator of such a complex and dangerous design soon found himself imprisoned by the very king who had once trusted him. Minos, enraged by the knowledge of his wife's infidelity and the monstrous offspring she had birthed, decided to punish Daedalus for his involvement. The king, now driven by anger, cast Daedalus into a prison of his own making. The very labyrinth Daedalus had designed to contain the Minotaur now served as his own prison, a bitter irony for the man who had crafted such a marvel. As time passed, the Minotaur became a legend, and the labyrinth was filled with the stories of those who were sent as sacrifices to the creature. Every year, 7 young men and 7 young women from Athens were sent to Crete as tributes, where they would enter the labyrinth and never return. These sacrifices were made in an effort to appease the gods and ensure the safety of the people. But the truth of the matter was that the labyrinth and the Minotaur represented the consequences of human arrogance and divine punishment. Pasiphae's unnatural act had resulted in a creature that became a living nightmare for the people of Crete, and the labyrinth, created to trap the Minotaur, was now a prison for the souls who were sent to feed it. Meanwhile, Daedalus, fearing for his life, began to devise an escape. He had been imprisoned in Crete, cut off from his craft, and forced to live in the shadow of his own creations. Yet, Daedalus's ingenuity was unmatched, and he knew that if he were to survive, he had to escape the island. Pasiphae, feeling guilty for the part she had played in the creation of the Minotaur and for the imprisonment of Daedalus, aided him in his escape. She provided him with the means to flee by sea, but even then, Minos had made it nearly impossible for Daedalus to escape. The king ordered that all boats on the island be searched for the fugitive, offering a great reward for anyone who could capture him. Daedalus, unable to escape by ship, turned once again to his skill and creativity. He crafted a pair of wings from feathers and wax, a marvelous invention that would allow him to fly away from Crete and evade Minos's grasp. However, in his excitement and desire to escape, Daedalus made a fatal mistake. He ignored the warning to fly low, and as he soared higher and higher into the sky, the sun melted the wax holding the feathers together. His wings disintegrated, and Daedalus fell to his death, a victim of his own ambition. The story of Daedalus, his creations, and the Minotaur remains one of the most tragic and poignant in Greek mythology. His genius, while unmatched in the realm of craftsmanship, led him down a path that ultimately destroyed him. The labyrinth, the wooden cow, and the Minotaur became symbols not just of his skill, but of the dangers of overreaching. Daedalus had created life and death through his work, but in the end, it was his own creation that would lead to his undoing. The legend of Daedalus serves as a reminder that even the greatest of minds can be consumed by their own creations, and that the consequences of one's actions can echo through the ages. Pasiphae, Queen of Crete, had found herself trapped in a web of divine retribution. Her love for the bull, which was instilled in her by the wrath of Poseidon, condemning her to an act that would echo through the ages. The love she felt for the bull was unnatural, a divine curse placed upon her by the god of the sea, and she turned to Daedalus, the master craftsman, for a solution. In her desperation, she sought a way to satisfy her strange desires, and Daedalus, with his unparalleled skill, fashioned for her a wooden cow. This contraption, crafted with cunning and precision, allowed her to conceal herself and fulfill her forbidden passion. The bull, believing the wooden cow to be a true mate, approached, and the union of these two creatures resulted in the birth of a monstrous being, the Minotaur. This creature, half man and half bull, would become a symbol of both divine wrath and the consequences of hubris. After the birth of the Minotaur, the monstrous offspring was locked away in a labyrinth designed by Daedalus himself. The labyrinth was a maze of twisted passages, so complex that no one could ever hope to escape. It became the perfect prison for the Minotaur, where it was kept hidden from the world only emerging to devour the sacrifices sent by the people of Athens. Every year, 7 young men and 7 young women were sent to Crete, where they were cast into the labyrinth as offerings to the creature. The Minotaur would hunt them down and kill them, its hunger unending and its strength terrifying. As the years passed, the legend of the Minotaur grew, and with it the tale of Pasiphae's unnatural love. The story of the bull, the cow, and the monster would be passed down through generations, a cautionary tale of the dangers of defying the gods and the consequences of actions driven by lust and pride. Pasiphae, once the queen of Crete, became a symbol of the folly of human desire and divine punishment. The labyrinth, a creation of her husband's kingdom, became a prison not only for the Minotaur, but also for the secrets of her shameful union. The consequences of Pasiphae's actions did not end with the birth of the Minotaur. Her love for the bull, once a secret, was now a public disgrace, and her role in the creation of the monster became a mark of dishonor. The tale of her forbidden passion was retold in various forms, and many artists and poets took inspiration from her tragedy. Her story became a symbol of the perils of unrestrained desire, a lesson in the destructive power of love when it defies the natural order. In various works of art, Pasiphae's figure was often depicted as one overwhelmed by her lust, a woman consumed by an unnatural passion that led to the birth of a monster. In the tragedy of Phaedra, the daughter of Pasiphae, the legacy of this cursed love is passed down, and the story of her mother's disgrace is revisited. Phaedra, tormented by her own desires, recognizes the fatal curse that runs through her bloodline. She laments the actions of her mother, knowing that she too is doomed to suffer the consequences of a love that cannot be controlled. Her grief is deep, as she is reminded of the wild and uncontrollable nature of Pasiphae's love for the bull, a love that led to the creation of the Minotaur and the ultimate downfall of her family. Throughout history, Pasiphae's story has been retold by poets, playwrights, and philosophers, each adding their own interpretation to the tale. The figure of the bull, once a symbol of divine favor, became associated with shame and unnatural passion. The myth of Pasiphae and the Minotaur serves as a warning, a reflection on the dangers of defying the gods and the consequences of unchecked desire. The labyrinth, the wooden cow, and the Minotaur all stand as symbols of the dark side of human nature, where passion and desire can lead to creation, but also to destruction. Pasiphae, the queen who loved a bull, became a tragic figure, her story intertwined with that of the Minotaur, a creature born of divine punishment and human folly. The legacy of Pasiphae's love and the monstrous birth of the Minotaur would forever be linked to the kingdom of Crete. The labyrinth, which once held the beast in its twisting passages, became a symbol of the entrapment of the human soul, bound by the consequences of its actions. The Minotaur, forever trapped within the maze, symbolized the consequences of Pasiphae's desires, a creature that could never escape the confines of its monstrous nature. The story of Pasiphae, the bull, and the Minotaur remains one of the most enduring tales of Greek mythology, a reflection of the complexities of human desire, the wrath of the gods, and the consequences of defying the natural order. Pasiphae, the queen of Crete, stood as a tragic figure, entangled in a fate she never sought. Her unnatural passion for a bull, ignited by the wrath of the gods, bound her in a tale of shame and monstrous consequences. The bull, a creature sent by Poseidon to symbolize Minos's divine right to rule, had been kept by the king, who refused to sacrifice it as promised. In retaliation, Poseidon cursed Pasiphae, making her fall in love with the beast. This unnatural longing, driven by divine vengeance, led Pasiphae to seek the help of Daedalus, the master craftsman of Crete. Daedalus, ever ingenious, crafted a wooden cow, an elaborate contraption with the outer appearance of a real cow. Pasiphae, desperate to fulfill her curse, hid inside the cow, and when the bull approached, it mated with the wooden disguise, unaware that it was actually the queen inside. The union resulted in the birth of the Minotaur, a creature of both man and bull, born from a mother's shameful lust and the wrath of the gods. The Minotaur, a symbol of Pasiphae's sin, was confined in a labyrinth that Daedalus, the very creator of the wooden cow, also designed. This labyrinth was a maze so intricate and confusing that no one who entered could ever find their way out. It was the perfect prison for the monstrous Minotaur, which devoured the youths and maidens sent to it as sacrifices. Each year, the people of Athens were forced to send 14 young men and women as tribute, to be fed to the beast in an effort to appease the gods. The Minotaur became a living embodiment of the consequences of Pasiphae's desire, a reminder of the punishment that befell her for defying the natural order. The labyrinth became a symbol of entrapment, not just for the Minotaur, but for the very essence of Pasiphae's guilt. The shame of her unnatural love, hidden behind the walls of the labyrinth, was an eternal punishment, as the creature that bore her sin was kept in a maze of endless confusion. Yet, the labyrinth was also a prison for Daedalus, the architect of the maze and the wooden cow. Once Minos discovered the truth of his wife's shame and the creature born from it, he turned on Daedalus. The craftsman, who had once been honored for his skill, was now seen as the one responsible for the monstrous outcome of Pasiphae's passion. Minos, in his rage, imprisoned Daedalus in the very labyrinth he had created, making the architect a prisoner of his own design. As the years went on, the tale of Pasiphae's passion and the birth of the Minotaur spread far and wide, becoming the stuff of myth and legend. The Minotaur, a creature both fearsome and tragic, represented the dangerous consequences of divine wrath and the unchecked desires of mortals. Pasiphae's story was one of great tragedy, as her unholy love not only brought about a monstrous birth, but also caused the ruin of those around her. Her story was passed down through generations, becoming a symbol of the dangers of forbidden love and the consequences of defying the gods. The labyrinth, created by Daedalus to house the Minotaur, was a fitting metaphor for the tangled web of guilt and shame that Pasiphae had woven for herself. Meanwhile, the legacy of the Minotaur and Pasiphae's cursed love affected not only those directly involved, but also their descendants. Ariadne, Pasiphae's daughter, became a key figure in the myth, caught in the tragedy of her family's legacy. She too would eventually face her own set of challenges, her fate tied to that of the Minotaur and the labyrinth. The story of Pasiphae, the bull, and the Minotaur would forever haunt the people of Crete, a dark reminder of the dangers of passion unchecked by reason or morality. In the myths, Pasiphae's role as the mother of the Minotaur was often mentioned with disdain, as her monstrous son became a symbol of her sin. Yet, despite the shame that marked her name, Pasiphae remained an integral part of the mythological landscape. Her love for the bull, though cursed and unnatural, would never be forgotten. The wooden cow, the labyrinth, and the Minotaur all stood as testaments to her forbidden desire and the punishment that followed. The story of Pasiphae and the Minotaur is one of deep moral complexity, of a queen ensnared by divine wrath, of a king whose pride led to suffering, and of a craftsman whose genius led to the creation of a prison for both the monster and its maker. As the tale of Pasiphae was retold through the ages, it came to represent more than just the tragic story of a woman's forbidden love. It became a cautionary tale about the consequences of crossing the boundaries set by the gods. Pasiphae's fate was sealed not only by her love for the bull, but also by the labyrinth of guilt and shame that she had created for herself. In the end, her story served as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked desire and the inevitable consequences of defying the will of the gods. The labyrinth, the minotaur, and the wooden cow would live on as symbols of the cost of such transgressions, forever etched into the fabric of Greek mythology.